Billy Budd, Chapter 11. Pale Air, Envy, and Despair. That Claggard's figure was not amiss, and his face, save the chin, was well moulded, has already been said. Of these favorable points he seemed not insensible, for he was not only neat but careful in his dress. But the form of Billy Budd was heroic, and if his face was without the intellectual look of the pallid Claggard's, not the less was it lit, like his, from within, though from a different source. The bonfire in his heart made luminous the rose tan in his cheek. In view of the marked contrast between the persons of the twain, it is more than probable that when the master-at-arms in the scene last given applied to the sailor the proverb, "Handsome is as handsome does," he there let escape an ironic inkling, not caught by the young sailors who heard it, as to what it was that had first moved him against Billy, namely, his significant personal beauty. Now envy and antipathy, passions irreconcilable in reason, nevertheless, in fact, may spring conjoined like Chang and Ing in one birth. Is envy then such a monster? Well, though many an arraigned mortal has in hopes of mitigated penalty pleaded guilty to horrible actions, did ever anybody seriously confess to envy? Something there is in it universally felt to be more shameful than even the felonious crime. And not only does everybody disown it, but the better sort are inclined to incredulity when it is in earnest imputed to an intelligent man. But since its lodgment is in the heart, not the brain, no degree of intellect supplies a guarantee against it. But Claggard's was no vulgar form of the passion, nor, as directed toward Billy Budd, did it partake of that streak of apprehensive jealousy that marred Saul's visage perturbedly brooding on the comely young David. Claggard's envy struck deeper. If askance he eyed the good looks, cheery health, and frank enjoyment of young life in Billy Budd, it was because these happened to go along with a nature that, as Claggart magnetically felt, had in its simplicity never willed malice or experienced the reactionary bite of that serpent. To him, the spirit lodged within Billy, and looking out from his welkin eyes, as from windows, that ineffability which made the dimple in his dyed cheek, suppled his joints, and danced in his yellow curls, made him preeminently the handsome sailor. One person excepted, the master-at-arms was perhaps the only man in the ship intellectually capable of adequately appreciating the moral phenomenon presented in Billy Budd, and the insight but intensified his passion, which, assuming various secret forms within him, at times assumed that of cynic disdain, disdain of innocence. To be nothing more than innocent. Yet, in an aesthetic way, he saw the charm of it, the courageous, free, and easy temper of it, and fain would have shared it, but he despaired of it. With no power to annul the elemental evil in himself, though he could hide it readily enough, apprehending the good, but powerless to be it, what recourse is left to a nature like Claggard's, surcharged with energy as such natures almost invariably are, but to recoil upon itself, and, like the scorpion for which the Creator alone is responsible, act out to the end its allotted part. Passion and passion, in its profoundest, is not a thing demanding a palatial stage whereon to play its part. Down among the groundlings, among the beggars and rakers of the garbage, profound passion is enacted, and the circumstances that provoke it, however trivial or mean, are no measure of its power. In the present instance, the stage is a scrubbed gun deck, and one of the external provocations a man-o'-war's man-spilled soup. Now, when the master-at-arms noticed whence came that greasy fluid streaming before his feet, he must have taken it, to some extent, wilfully perhaps, not for the mere accident it assuredly was, but for the sly escape of a spontaneous feeling on Billy's part, more or less answering to the antipathy on his own. In effect, a foolish demonstration, he must have thought, and very harmless, like the futile kick of a heifer, which yet, were the heifer a shod stallion, would not be so harmless. Even so, it was that into the gall of envy Claggart infused the vitriol of his contempt. But the incident confirmed to him certain telltale reports purveyed to his ear by Squeak, one of his more cunning corporals, a grizzled little man, so nicknamed by the sailors on account of his squeaky voice and sharp visage, ferreting about the dark corners of the lower decks after interlopers, satirically suggesting to them the idea of a rat in a cellar. Now his chiefs employing him as an implicit tool in laying little traps for the worriment of the foretopman, for it was from the master-at-arms that the petty persecutions heretofore averted to had proceeded. The corporal, having naturally enough concluded that his master could have no love for the sailor, made it his business, faithful understrapper that he was, to ferment the ill blood by perverting to his chief certain innocent frolics of the good-natured foretopman, besides inventing for his mouth sundry contumelious epithets he claimed to have overheard him let fall. The master-at-arms never suspected the veracity of these reports, more especially as to the epithets, for he well knew how secretly unpopular may become a master-at-arms, at least a master-at-arms in those days zealous in his function, and how the bluejackets shot at him in private their raillery and wit, the nickname by which he goes among them, Jimmy Legs, implying under the form of merriment their cherished disrespect and dislike. In view of the greediness of hate for provocation, it hardly needed a purveyor to feed Claggart's passion. An uncommon prudence is habitual with the subtler depravity, for it has everything to hide. And in case of any merely suspected injury, its secretiveness voluntarily cuts it off from the enlightenment or disillusion, and not unreluctantly, action is taken upon surmise as upon certainty. And the retaliation is apt to be in monstrous disproportion to the supposed offense, for when in anybody was revenge in its exactness aught else but an inordinate usure? But how with Claggart's conscience? For though consciences are as unlike as foreheads, every intelligence, not excluding the scriptural devils who believe and tremble, has one. But Claggart's conscience, being but the lawyer to his will, made ogres of trifles, probably arguing that the motive imputed to Billy in spilling the soup just when he did, together with the epithets alleged, these, if nothing more, made a strong case against him. Nay, justified animosity into a sort of retributive righteousness. The Pharisee is the Guy Fawkes prowling in the hid chambers underneath some natures like Claggart's, and they can really form no conception of an unreciprocated malice. Probably the master-at-arms' clandestine persecution of Billy was started to try the temper of the man, but it had not developed any quality in him that enmity could make official use of, or ever pervert into even plausible self-justification. So that the occurrence at the mess, petty if it were, was a welcome one to that peculiar conscience assigned to be the private mentor of Claggart. And for the rest, not improbably, it put him upon new experiments. And we'll pause here and we'll go on with chapter 12 in the next video. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment below. Love you guys. As Tigger says, ta-ta for now.